like to call the meeting of the Minnehaha County Election Review Committee to order. And I would like Robert to call the roll.
Joel Ahrens? Here. Bruce?
Yes?
Deb Ellison?
Here.
Lloyd Hogsted?
Here.
Amy Garrison?
Yep.
Sue Roust?
Here.
Nakia Warren?
Here.
I want to make an announcement that we have all the agenda packets available outside the door for anybody that would like to see our agenda for today and any other notes. And I also wanted to make a note to the public, both on YouTube and in person, that we have an opportunity for the public to make comments at the beginning of these meetings. You may bring up any issue during this period, but we ask if you're addressing a specific issue of our meeting on the agenda, if you could please wait for that section of the public comment. And when addressing the Election Review Committee, please step to the podium and state your name for the record. And then also wanted to, because some people have been asking me to state the reason we're here, is the Minnehaha County Commission, Auditor Bob Litz, and the Secretary of State of South Dakota, Chantel Krebs, have each appointed a member of this committee to identify, review, and help with the solutions to the issues surrounding our recent elections. This is our third of 5 planned meetings we are conducting to help the Commission, the County Auditor, and the public with the reviewing of the election process. And we're at this, I would entertain a motion to accept the approval of the agenda for today.
So moved, Kia Warren.
Second, Lori.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Kia had sent out an email with quite a bit of information about local use of the equipment bought with HAVA funds for local elections. Are we going to discuss that? That isn't necessarily part of this committee, but it was useful information, and I just wondered if that was going to be on an agenda at any point.
That would be one of the questions I was going to ask in this meeting. Is we have the 2 meetings left that we've kind of anticipated having, one for sure and possibly the 5th one. And I wanted to bring that into what areas have we missed? What do we need to cover yet? Okay. I know next meeting is going to be a rather full agenda.
Okay.
And I personally have learned so much in these meetings that I'm asking myself questions all the time. So please, we would really like to be able to add whatever else into these proceedings to make it right.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, this is Kia. I didn't plan to get it on this agenda. I just thought if it came up, I wanted to let you guys know because it was sent out to all the county auditors and to the cities and schools that are planning to use these poll books for their spring election. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that in case anyone came up and maybe asked you a question, but if it can fit on one of the other 2 meeting agendas, it might be a good topic discussion.
Absolutely. We can talk about that. We as Bruce said, we're full next week, fairly full at our next meeting. But if that is the appropriate time to discuss it, then we can certainly do that.
We'll work on that with the next agenda and then get it out to everybody. We have 2 other issues here on the approval of the minutes from the January 16th, 2014.
We didn't vote to approve the agenda.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Roll call.
Robert, could you do the roll call?
Yes. Joel?
Yep, here.
Bruce?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yep.
Sue?
Yes.
And Kia?
Yes.
Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from our January 16th, 2014 meeting. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Kia.
Robert, could you call the roll?
Joel?
Yep.
Bruce?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yep.
Sue?
Yes.
And Kia?
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the January 23rd, 2014 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Is that on our agenda?
We have an updated one that,
Oh,
Paper copies.
okay,
yes,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry,
All
that's,
right. Yep, so move to approve January 23rd.
do I have a second?
Second.
Deb Ellison seconds.
All right.
Do we take the roll?
For an approval, yeah.
Yes, take the roll for approval. Joel?
Joel?
Yes.
Bruce?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Kia?
Yes.
And that passes. Now, we're opening up the floor now for opportunity for public comment. And this is the time set aside for public comment for anything that isn't currently on the agenda. And if you wish to address our body, if you could come to the microphone and at the podium. Is there anybody here for public comment? Then we'll move on. We'll move on to our next, is the discussion of the challenges and opportunities related to combining the municipal and school district and federal elections. And this was a question that was brought up in our very first meeting, and we'd like to explore the possibility and know what challenges that we'd have and what problems we'd have with any aspects of combining all of our local elections in Minnehaha County and that we have on our even years, especially when we have a primary in June. If we could, what thoughts everybody has about being able to bring in the school district and the city. And we know there's some issues that we need to deal with, so this will be a long-term thing that we would be driving for to fix if possible. And, you know, we have two people that are experienced in the room with, on our group that have experience with these elections. In Pennington County, Julie has been combining these elections and the issues that she has. And then we also have Sue and Lori who have done local elections here in Minnehaha County, and we would like to be able to bring that in. And who would like to take the floor first? Julie?
We've combined federal, county, state, school elections and city elections in Pennington County under contract for a number of years. It was actually pushed forward from the city and the school districts in Pennington County so that voters only had to go to elections one day rather than the 3 different days. It was really a push for them to only have that for voter convenience, as well as they believed and wanted the larger turnout that comes along with our primary dates. In the off-election years, the odd number years, we still do those combination elections for them at our office. And then the costs are split based off of a formula of number of voters voting in the different areas of the county, and we even do overlap districts. We do when Rapid City School District, which overlaps into another county, had a special election. We even did the Meade County portion of that school district so that it could all be counted out at one rather than counting it at 2 different and trying to combine them, and it worked really well. I will say that in the instance when you combine all the elections together, it saves the county money because you had the same expenses whether you share with a city or a school anyway. You will end up with more splits. Each entity pays for the number of ovals and the number of splits that you have anyway, but it is more expensive for the schools and the city, but they get a much bigger turnout, and that's what drove all of the boards in Pennington. So it's worked very successfully here.
When you said that Meade County joined, do they also then, is that just that school district that was involved? in
Yes,
that
it was just
portion?
Rapid City School District, which is right over into Blackhawk.
Okay,
And we just brought their ballots into Pennington to count.
okay.
So that Meade County didn't have to have a programming charge and,
When you talk about the ovals, you know, when you split the costs, that was gonna be one of my questions as we moved into this. I'd like to delve into that a little bit more, because that's gonna be a main concern with, you know, how did the school districts and the cities deal with having the one election?
when you break out the charges and when you program a ballot, there's charges per race, there's charges for splits, there's charges for how many ovals you have. So if the school district has 5 candidates, that's 5 oval charges. So it's really broken down very specifically to have the program done.
Is that something from the tabu, you know, like ES&S, or is that something that is done in statute or in Board of Election rules, or?
No, it's a charge from the vendor
Okay.
to program the scanners to count.
So that really is kind of a set price even if you have 3 different elections or just one election, they're still gonna be charged so much per oval.
Per oval, per candidate, per split. Yeah, those are all basic charges.
Is there an initial setup charge?
Yes,
that-
there's
that
various
then has
set-
to be split?
Yeah.
So in each one of those, say, 3 elections, there would be some kind of a setup charge for
Yes,
setting up the programming?
Yeah,
and then-
from the vendor. And we actually go through a time study to see how long it actually costs, how long it takes us to process a normal absentee ballot at the counter, how long it takes it to process the absentees that are done through the mail, and how much time our office staff spend on it. So it's quite detailed how we break that expenses down when we have a split election. Number of copies, supplies, you have the cost for all the envelopes, all of that, and it's split. So, but what it saved those districts is not having to buy, until this latest opinion, that we can't use equipment unless we charge for it for local elections. It saved those local jurisdictions from having to buy the expensive scanning equipment and duplicating all the supplies, the supply bags, and so it saves them in that aspect. But the drive was the convenience for the voter, as well as the larger turnout is what they wanted. And I know it was mentioned that our elections are partisan, but there are sometimes nonpartisan things on the ballot, and it doesn't seem to affect the drop-off, if you will, any more or less when you have all of the federal, county, or federal, state, county offices. Then you go into the city and the school districts. It doesn't seem to have any more fall-off than you would if they were held separately.
So you're looking at that part of the ballot as the like the nonpartisan judges and
Yes, and the issues, they
water
all come
district
after.
said.
The judges.
Do you have a
It's
question?
worked very well for us.
Lori?
I just wanted to add that even though we're looking at this long range, just for the current time being, that our city charter, our section 6.01 subsection A states specifically that the date of the city election shall be set by ordinance as the second Tuesday in April. And in order to make a change to our charter, we would need to have our charter review commission, which will start meeting later this fall, actually, for proposed changes for our next election in 16. and they would need to make a recommendation to place that on the ballot, because our charter can only be changed by the voters, the voters of Sioux Falls in an election, and then that would need to come before the voters, and they would, if they approved it or did not approve it, that would be where we would be at with it. We could not just plan to go ahead with this. It would take some processes to get to that point.
Is ballot order on those set by rule then?
Is it rule or law?
I think it's law. The layout of the ballot as far as the order of the races is set by administrative rule. The order of candidates within races is set by law.
And if I could add, our order of candidates is set by our charter as well, that we draw for the order, so it's not alphabetical or who came in first. We draw for the order of the names on the ballot.
One thing to add
Yes,
on to what Lori said is Sioux Falls is unique in this state in that it has elections only in the even-numbered years, and that's a factor too, because in odd-numbered years, the Sioux Falls School District here is faced with having a standalone election, and that factors in when we talk about voting centers and so on, and that's another thing that is set by charter. The city has it every other year on the
It
even
is, yeah.
years.
Even numbered years.
Having some experience with the Sioux Falls city elections and the charter, that would be why I referenced it's a long-term approach. We have to maybe look at doing this, and it would have to be voted on in 2016, and if it was able to be passed in 2016, then the charter would be revised, and then the date posted. It would give that flexibility. And now the other side of this whole thing would be the school district. And we would need to be able to work with the school district to see what changes they would have to make in order to bring this into alignment if they so wish.
I think in Pennington, Rapid City, because it's not a home charter, and I believe that's how it's done in the school districts, is by ordinances. Do school districts have ordinances that they would make that change by? So it's a much shorter,
State law.
just state law gives you the option.
Bev, could you come up to the podium? Because I'm glad I saw you sitting there.
But the board has to make the decision, but it's a much shorter time frame.
The state
Could I
law-
ask one? Could you state your name and your position?
I'm Bev Chase, and I'm with the Sioux Falls School District.
Thank you, Bev.
And state law allows schools to set their election date anytime between the second Tuesday of April and the third Tuesday in June. And then the school board of each school district must take an action before their first January meeting of the year to set that date.
Now that you've kind of been here with the setup of this, and do you have some real concerns if all of a sudden, let's say instead of getting, what's your usual on an odd year or even on an even year for election turnout? You gave us some numbers before.
Well, election turnout with the city is always larger because we have the council races and the mayor races. The mayor races tend to be the highest turnout. And then when we have an off year, it used to be I counted on 15%, but the last few years it's been less than 5.
So we're probably looking at 4,000 people in the odd years. And then, so
Their terms expire, they run for 3-year terms. Their terms expire staggered. We have 2 this year, 2 next year, 1 the next year. So there's an election every year.
yes, and when you do that, when you do the staggering, it's odd this year, even next time, and so that, what issues concern you? And actually, even if you wanted to write anything to us, we would appreciate that in an email to add to our discussion, that the concerns that you would have in coming to the school board and asking about this change.
There's a great cost savings to join with any other entity to do in elections. There's a great cost savings to that. I think our board has tried to stay away from partisan elections, though. Anyway, for the last 20 years, they've tried to stay away from partisan elections. And they like to hold their elections when parents are in town and school is still on their minds.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
Bev, what is the normal amount of money that the school board pays to hold elections?
Last year, it was 23,000. This year, of course, it's going to be considerably higher because I have to use Synergy to create the ballots, and I have to buy e-poll books, and it's going to be considerably higher this year. We're estimating around 43 to 44,000.
When you say Synergy, what service do they provide?
They create the ballots, they program the optical scanners, they provide the chips for the auto marks.
How many e-poll books are you going to buy?
50.
50?
Mhm.
50? Okay. Are you going to work with any of the other governmental units to use their poll books as well?
Well,
Or not.
right now, I've emailed every county that I know that has them, and they're having elections, so I
Oh.
can't get their e-poll books.
They're in use?
Yes,
Yeah.
and when we buy our e-poll books, then of course the city will use our e-poll books as well for their elections on the even years.
So the $43,000 this year, or for this year,
The
part of that is...
43,000, no, the 43,000 is just the ongoing election costs for the programming and all of that stuff. The capital cost for the e-poll books is a separate fund,
Do you know how much that's going to be?
113,000.
There's, let's say if the county was able to work with the e-poll books in a future election, is that something that would be able to be shared then with the county?
We would definitely let the county talk to us about leasing our
You bet.
e-poll books.
In that situation, how many of them are you buying for 113,000?
50.
50.
That would be 50 e-poll books, 50 licenses, and the once-a-year software programming thing.
When has the purchase order already gone out, and are they being delivered now?
The
Or
board is in the process of doing that. It should be on Monday's agenda.
okay.
Is storage of those an issue for you folks?
No.
I just wanted to bring up that in our next meeting, we're actually going to have a demonstration of the HART system, just as an example, because that's the one that's
That's
commonly used.
And that's the system we're buying.
Okay. So we'll be having that demonstration. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I hope you're back to be part of our discussion and everything. So we may have some more questions for you. Does anybody else have any more questions for Bev?
Can I just ask, this has kind of come up lately, this issue of using county-owned equipment for local elections. Is it possible for local entities to use them and pay a fee for them?
Yes, if they're purchased with HAVA funds at a county level, and Kia can probably speak more in detail to it, then we cannot let a local government use them. We have to charge them a reasonable and customary fee.
And so we have other entities in the state that have purchased their own? Local entities that have purchased their own?
County, as far as I know.
This is Kia. I think Sioux Falls Schools is going to be the first one that's going to purchase them for a local jurisdiction. The other counties that have purchased them, their cities and schools use them in their elections. But I think the Sioux Falls School will be the first one to purchase them outside of a county.
And my understanding is you don't get any HAVA funds as part of that? That has to
No.
just come out of your
It
capital
comes out of
improvements?
our
Or
capital fund, capital outlay fund.
And whose scanners do you use?
The city owns a scanner, so we will be using their scanner.
In this situation, and maybe someone from the auditor's office can help us, that when it comes time to use the scanners as part of this whole process, are both scanners set up so if one fails, the other one would be able to take over as we've experienced already?
Bob Litz from the auditor's office, and this is a conversation that we were just having yesterday. And I think what Julie said, and listening to Kia and the emails that have been going around, a usual and customary reasonable fee, we'll figure out. But yeah, we think we should have both of those machines running for this election, absolutely.
And-
So the city bought one of them, we bought one of them, so we obviously wouldn't charge for the cities, but we've got to, according to what I've heard, we've got to charge the city for the use of ours, and then put that money back into the state HAVA fund.
So how does this work in an election where we have, say, if all three entities were able to have the election on the same date? What kind of formula does Minnehaha County have to do that type of thing? Have they even considered?
Well, right now, you got to understand, I think Pennington County's process goes a lot deeper than ours, and what we do is we do the absentees, and then we do vote tabulation, and we keep track of everybody's hours and any materials that we might need, that are used in the election, and there's a few other things, but we keep track of it, and we have a contract, and then we bill them for that.
I remember in last year's election when you sent me the contract, and so I could see it for the first time. And can you explain how the city works through that process? And
Sure, we sit down each time we're going to have an election and review the contract and see if we need to make any changes. This year, we just made a few minor changes. There were, for instance, packing the ballot boxes. We had been doing that for the last two elections, and it said the county did it, so just a matter of changing it. I know for our next election in 16, we'll have probably a number of changes, because now we'll have to incorporate some of the fees that the county will need to charge us for use of, for instance, our scanner and automarks and any other equipment that they purchase. So we definitely will be taking a look at that. But Bob and I work through it, and then our attorneys review it, and then we bring it before both the county commission and the city council for approval of the contracts. And I will add that we do not have our own e-poll books either. We rented them, leased them for our last election from the Secretary of State. We leased 105, and so that's something that we will need to be discussing as well on our end, is purchase of e-poll books. And I don't have the urgency that Bev does with the school district. Our election won't be until April 2016, but we do need to start that discussion very soon.
Do you know what those costs were, Lori? What our rental cost?
Well, our fee last year was really good, and we were told it would not be the same the next time, and this was based on the previous Secretary of State, but we paid $10 per machine. And that was just because, and Bev and I have talked about this, and Bev, when she was instrumental in getting the total vote and the e-poll books and vote centers going, was that we were kind of the test market for using these e-poll books. And again, we were again this last time for 2014, which is why we received such a good deal on the lease of the machines. And at that time, former Secretary of State Gantz said that will not be the price, the next time. And now obviously he's not there, but and we're not even able to do that. But we did get a really good deal for those 105.
So is the cost mandate a part of election rule or statute? And the reason I ask that is because I'm looking at SDCL 12-2-5. It says expenses of a combined election shall be shared in a manner agreed upon by the governing body of the subdivision and the county commissions involved. But what I'm hearing you say, Bob, is there's other regulations that use the language usual and customary?
I think what you might be referring to is when you talk about HAVA funds, the Help America Vote Act, you're talking about federal dollars, and it comes with a separate set of rules or
Okay.
whatever you want to call it.
And that opinion that we can't use it for local elections just came since Secretary Krebs took office. So Kia could probably talk to that.
So because these poll books have been purchased by the state with HAVA funds, we now have increased cost to the subdivisions as a result of that? Is that,
We will, it's
What
my
I-
understanding, and Kia could clarify, that they're going to be surplusing their e-poll books and will no longer have them. And Kia could address that.
I'd like to,
I'm having a really hard time. Some of you guys are cutting out when you're talking, especially I think the ones that are coming up to the speaker to talk. It's kind of going in and out. But under the Help America Vote Act, those funds can only be used to help improve or administer a federal election. And so those funds and what the current administration looked at is there's a election assistance commission opinion that talks about e-poll books at a local level do not fall under the administration of federal elections. And I think former Secretary Gant, when he did this as a pilot project, and just talking with county auditors and some of the local jurisdictions and looking through documents that are up, we don't see anything that outlined how long that pilot project would go. So it started in 2011, and now it's 2015, and Secretary Krebs and our legal counsel going through looking at the Help America Vote Act itself, our HAVA state plan, and some of the opinions and Q&As that the Election Assistance Commission on the federal level provides to states. We believe that it's not appropriate to continue using federal funds for local elections. So I don't know what other question the last person had, because it was kind of cutting in and out.
Kia, the question was, are you going to be surplusing your e-poll books then that you have in your inventory?
Yeah, as of right now, we only have 15 in our office. Hyde County, Hughes County, and Brookings County rented them, and they are going to be purchasing them. And so they still have those in their possession. After the last general election, the former administration just left them there for them to store, and they will be purchasing those from us. And then there's only going to be, we only have 15 left in the office. So we didn't even have enough where we could even, lease to like the school district Sioux Falls, and even under the opinions and everything that we've read, we don't even think we can do that.
It sounds like in our next meeting, when we have the HART representatives here, we could probably delve into this part of it a lot deeper. I understand they would like to have one of their marketing people come along with, so they could answer some of these questions for us. So we may have a more in-depth conversation than I even imagined. So we have, because the surplusing thing, how long will these machines, the one that I have seen was in Windows XP, and we all know that Windows XP is being phased out. And are your machines going to be Windows 7 or?
The machines we're buying have Windows 7. I confirmed with the HART representative that is working with us that if Windows 7 is no longer supported in the next 10 years, it could go away. Could these be upgraded? And he said there is enough memory on these new machines to give us Windows 8 or 10.
All right.
So they are upgradable, the ones we bought, that we're buying.
In your $113,000 contract, they have, how much support is coming with that?
That is just the licensing and the licenses for the 50 poll books, and then the software and the initial setup and all of that. That's what that is.
Okay.
We have to hire another company to provide our technical support on election day. So in the past, the Secretary of State's office hosted the server where the election was kept on election day. The server then gathered the information from the e-poll books and relayed the information back to the e-poll books, telling them people had voted, you know. And that is a server held somewhere else. In the 11 and 12 elections, the school district hosted the server. It meant that it reduced our bandwidth for all our schools, and that is not an an optimal thing when you have testing going on in April. So we needed to get a server outside the district to host this.
And you don't know where that cloud server is?
Well, the company we have hired is in Pierre, and he works with other counties in South Dakota to host the servers, to provide the technical support for Total Vote. He has remote access to the e-poll books, so if an e-poll book is down in Gloria Day Church, he can go from Pierre to Gloria Day Church and fix that e-poll book without driving there.
Okay. Good. Anybody else have any questions?
And that service is another additional cost for our election this year.
Is there any way that you could kind of give a summary? Because I'm going to ask actually between Julie and Lori when we go further into this, so we can kind of get an idea of what all the different costs are involved, that some of us have never been involved in the side of it, and this just opens a whole other set of questions on how cost sharing can be accomplished and find ways to.
This year, our new costs are the programming of the 850s, and in the past, Zood used to program our automarks, and the chips come from Synergy now, and then the technical support on election day, that is a new cost for us as well. Our typical costs are, our biggest cost, of course, is our election workers. And then we have costs for supplies. Our supply cost is minimal with the 13 vote centers. Then we have advertising. Advertising is very expensive in the Sioux Falls Argus Leader. And we have to print the ballot and the map, and that usually runs around, for the school district, usually runs around $5,000–6,000. And then we have the cost of the ballots, and the ballot cost in the past was the actual paper ballot and then to have Brown and Sanger print them. And now Synergy will do that for us. So the cost goes up per ballot, but you know, you gotta have Synergy do it so you can run them on the scanner. So it's catch-22 there.
Bev, that $43,000 figure that you gave earlier, that's the total number, right?
Yeah, that will be what we're expecting to spend for our workers, supplies, advertising, and the technical and the computer support, and the ballots. And then, you know, we have personnel costs, and we have some money in there to pay the county for their programming, and we have a contract with the county to process our absentee votes, and so they bill us for that as well. And this year, of course, they can't just let us use the automarks, so we have to rent the automarks from the county as well. So that cost is in there too. All of these have escalated.
Elections are not cheap.
They are not cheap. And a lot of it's in statute, so you can't just not do it.
The only thing that's not in statute is the automarks do not have to be
Right.
used except for federal elections. And in Pennington County, none of our special districts, cities on down, choose to use those automarks.
We use the automarks because I have so many, I've been in so many precincts in this city, and we have at least, you know, even if it's one voter, I don't care. If that voter gets to cast a private ballot without anybody else helping them, I think the $10 per automark is worth it.
That's what you pay the
That's what we
county
will
for
pay the county,
automarks?
yes.
We made a policy decision back in 2006, I believe, is when these machines, or was it 2004?
Yes, 6.
2006, when they debuted that the local elections would use them as well, because we thought that consistency was important. And we've had such good feedback from voters who use them and expect to see them every time they go to vote.
And let me tell you a story. We have a husband and wife in my home precinct, and he's a Republican and she's a Democrat. And the first year we got the auto mark, she got to vote by herself. And she says, this is the first time in my life that I know my ballot was marked the way that I wanted it to be, because she is totally blind. So to me, that made that money worth it, so. And another time I was at Sunnycrest Methodist Church, and a lady come in with a cane, a white cane, and she said, I can't see well enough to mark my ballot, will you help me? And I said, well, I'd be happy to do that, but have you ever tried the ballot marker? And she said no, and I said, well, let me get you started. It's got Braille, it's got forward and backward keys, and if you get into a bind, then I will certainly help you mark your ballot, but just try this. And so she tried it, and she got done voting, and she had the biggest grin. I'm telling you, it was ear to ear, and she said, I've never got to vote by myself before. And she thought that was great. So that is the reason I will fight for the auto marks.
Do you have any idea how many people actually use it? I firmly believe in allowing people to have that ability, and I
You know, it
appreciate
varies.
this.
It
but-
varies with the parts of town and the different elections. We always have more people use them for the federal when I'm working those than we do for the local, because usually it's 2 circles. But for those people who need it, for those people who cannot see or cannot manipulate a pencil or a pen, it works really well for them, and they use it.
I'd
So,
like to ask somebody from the auditor's office a question. If they, on this past election, any one of you could come up and identify yourself and answer it, how many people may have used the auto mark? Do you have any idea? Any way would we know this? I'm just curious.
You know, it's been my experience in my 4 years at anywhere from 2 to 10, depending on the election and where they're at. I would tell you Prince of Peace, they like to have them down there, and there's a couple other places that I can't think of right off the top of my head. But you know, in most superintendents' view, it's a lot of extra work, and it's a lot of concern. It's a lot of work from the auditor's office. But I'm of the same flavor as Bev is. I know a gentleman who's paralyzed, and his hands are starting to shrink, and he's got kind of a leathery bump right there, and he taps that tap screen with that. What's that worth? At what cost democracy, I guess, you know. When I first got here, we used to program them up in the hall after hours, you know, and that was quite a thing there, and that's how I became acquainted with them and the amount of work that it takes to put them in, because we were programming our own chips and actually setting those machines up for that election. And recently, between the primary and the general election, we decided to go with this. Well, Synergy has turned into actually Sea Change. One of them bought the other, and they were joined at the hip before that. They've combined services and companies, and it's provided some efficiencies for them, I think. But so we went with their services, and Julie goes. I believe you're out there. I think we were the only county in South Dakota that used that, and I would attribute that to the remarkably talented Sue Roust being able to do things that, you know, since I've gotten here, we don't have any programmed computers, you know, or I mean, computer programmers in my office. And so that was by and large, once we went to them 850s, the reason that we went with those services as well.
Can I make
Yes.
a comment on that? When I was here, I did do the programming, and I always considered that it was really no cost because I was salaried. There was no additional cost if I stayed after hours and did some programming. I felt it was a good service to provide. But before I left office, I did tell the folks at both the city and the school district, made it clear to them that they should not be under the expectation that after I left, they would still be getting those for free, because I said, if somebody in the office is doing it, it will be an hourly employee, and so at the very least, you will be paying staff costs for it. So they knew in advance that it was coming.
You know, and when we realized that we were in trouble, it was one of the primaries where we had to put an independent ballot out, because there was no programming for that, and we certainly didn't know how to do it, and so we kind of manually took charge of that. But it was that was one of the big catalysts towards moving us to those services.
If I could ask if we circulate a spreadsheet, or you could start a spreadsheet, or if you've already got one that breaks down, you know, how you would calculate an election, you know, the expenses, so we could see across if we are talking about doing our combining versus not. And I just wanted to see how.
I could send, I'll have staff send to you to send out our spreadsheet. It's quite
If we could
entailed.
start with it, and then your office, and then the city, and Bev, if you could get a copy of it, and just see how all of this breaks down, so those of us that have never been involved in this side of it could see how all of this fits in. And
We could dig back and provide for, 4 or 5 years worth of those billings, and those billings are pretty explicit as to what the expenses are, so I think that'd satisfy your request.
if we start with, say, Julie's setup, because she's been doing it this way, and anything else that you would add into the categories, just add another line into the spreadsheet and help us to understand that, because I, for one, are seeing some things in here that I would like to look at deeper, and brought up a lot already in this discussion this morning, so we'd appreciate that. Anybody else have anything more on this topic?
I'd be interested, Bev, do you have issues regarding getting folks to work at the precincts on election day in terms of supervisors, both?
I have more issues getting superintendents than I do getting workers. I don't have much issue anymore since we only use the 13, because I have a big pool to pull from. I take all of the workers that Bob used for his November election, and I get the list that Lori used the year before, and I assume they do the same thing. And we pull from that whole big pool, and we have not had trouble getting them since we've been doing vote centers. When we did 59 precincts, we sometimes struggled to get workers. With the 13 vote centers, I now have people that if someone gets sick on election morning, I can call somebody and say, I need a worker at so-and-so, can you go? And they go. So it has helped doing the vote centers, but we don't struggle like we used to. And people come in, we had a lady the other day come in and say, could you give Bev my name? I'd like to be an election worker. So then we placed her, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bev, how many under the new vote center concept now, how many voting sites will there be in the upcoming election?
13.
And then do you use the same, do those overlay with the city then?
They are the exact same. We have a contract with the city that we will use whatever they use, so we use the same 13 that they use.
So the 13 are the 13 locations, and then you also have the county auditor?
Yeah, we have the
so that-
absentee precinct here in the
Right.
county auditor's office. And I believe the city does as well.
Yeah.
So there's actually 14 sites to vote at, but not on election day.
And then are there, because you use voting centers and because you cross over county lines with the school district, are there any coordination issues there that you have to?
We just try and advertise, This year I'm going to advertise in the Shoppers News too. People have said, why are you putting this in the Argus? No one gets that paper. So I said, well, we have to, so. But the Shoppers News arrives on their doorstep every Tuesday night, so they will have that pull-out page on there. So. And we send flyers to our schools to post, to just remind them that, election day is whatever, and please go vote. We send flyers to all our schools. And on election day, on the places that we don't use, we're putting signs up at the doors that voters would enter. So if someone would actually go to the wrong place to vote, they will know where to go to cast their ballot.
Do you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If I could add to that too, we do very similar to what Bev does, and we're also going to start using the shopping news for our next election as well. But we also send out an insert in our March water bill that lists the vote centers. And I know some of the candidates, even for our last council election, would repost those vote centers on their campaign material, which is not required, and we don't have anything to do with that. But it was nice that they did do that, and we also put the signs on the places that we do not use, that used to be used, so that if anyone does go there.
So if there's a call on election day, do those calls then go to the auditor's office or do they go to the IPC?
Some, they go either way.
Okay.
Sometimes the auditor's office and sometimes to me. Sometimes the city gets them.
Bruce,
Yes.
in response to Joel's question about coordination, if it was a combined with the counties, that's when the real coordination issues would come in. So those issues are not there now, but, and somebody alluded to it earlier, where you count the ballots is important. If we had it on, if you were combined with a primary election, so you've got Lincoln County ballots, if those races are on the Lincoln County ballot, then they get counted in Canton, then you have to add them together. So that's where some real coordination questions would come in.
Where did the school district ballots get physically counted at, delivered
They
to
get
and
counted
counted?
down here, down
Here
the
at the
court.
courthouse here?
Yeah.
I have more questions, but we'll be delving into this in more. Yes, come up.
Yeah, my name's Greg Ellis. I'm election supervisor and resident rebel rouser or instigator or whatever. Two things I'm kind of coming up with this, and I'm just kind of curious because I hear about this federal money for federal elections and stuff. Number one, if we combine everything, would the city, county, and school board elections be a final tally on primary day or on general election day? And can you split that up like that, or is that going to be a conflict possibly with interfering with the federal election?
Well,
Let me take a stab at that. I just want to speak at it from
Sure.
a statutory perspective. I mean, from what's currently in state law, there is a permissive statute that allows subdivisions, whatever they may be, cities, school districts, whatever, to do their election on the June primary day, so that first Tuesday in June is when they have permission through state statute to hold consolidated elections on those dates. It's not a mandate right now. It's only a permissive statute, so it's up to the subdivisions whether they want to, do it on that date or do it one of the other permissible days.
Okay, because I know that, you're gonna got all the precinct committee people and stuff coming in too. Ballots get a little crowded. Also, let's say like a city's got a bond issue or something like that, can that be finalized on a primary day election along with, say, city councilmen and school board members, or does that have to carry over to the general election? Is there any provision about that too?
Well, if it's a city bond issue, it's gonna be held whenever the next regular city election is, unless it invokes some kind of special election
So then the general
ordinance.
election would basically be your legislatures and any, I guess runoffs would be separately if they were too close in a certain precinct for, state rep or state senate. Or would that be possibly both of them on the general election?
Well, I think when you invoke the possibility of a runoff, I mean, the first thing I think of is the Sioux Falls mayoral elections. They have provisions for runoffs. State and federal law or state and federal candidates under state law, there is no runoff provisions. It's winner take all here in South Dakota. But there is
For the congressional, there is a runoff provision in the primaries. I think it's if no candidate gets 35% of the vote.
in the primary, but not in the general election.
Not the general, yeah, yes, you're right.
And the city runoffs, and I believe schools, highest voter. In city runoffs, they're in statute, they're 3 weeks later now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of figure out how, and it sounds like everything's fitting in pretty good, because if voters get 2 pages worth of ballot issues to fill out, it's gonna overwhelm them, and they'll give up, and that's what I'm afraid of. Because you put everybody, put your city elections, your county election, school board, and then you got all your committee people and all your other candidates, and all of a sudden you're flipping pages, and it's just gonna create a backlog and stuff. That's why I was hoping that, and I think my question got answered, is that city council and school board is finalized on primary day, where the general election carries on basically like it has been.
Right, and then there would be the possibility that under the city charter, as it currently stands, there's a runoff provision. So that could end up with a subsequent election being held after the June primary date. But there's some things that won't appear on the ballot in the primary. For example, state constitution referendums, initiatives, judicial elections, unless there's a primary or multiple candidates, running for those positions. So there's some things that won't appear on that ballot either. So we want to be careful not to conflate the general election ballot with the primary election ballot. So I think it kind of balances out like that too.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, because I know that everything costs money, and I saw Sue kind of snicker when she was heard about the artist leader prices.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll agree to that.
We've in Pennington, we've not had to ever go to a second ballot in a primary. So it's usually not an issue.
If we've exhausted this discussion for now, we can come back to it, but I'd like to move along to the discussion and to consider the county purchasing another vote counting machine or tabulator, another 850. Because of the issues that we had in the last election, where the 850 died for 45 minutes, we were stuck with not having another backup machine. What would have happened if the situation would have happened like our previous trip downstairs to look at the tabulator, and then the other machine died? So what would have happened if both of those would have died that night? And we'd have been stuck until somebody could figure out whatever their particular issues were. And then while we're tied back into this, I was wondering if our supplier has ever gotten back with anybody on the error log question that we had. So,
They did answer back and say that the type of information that you were looking for wouldn't show the error log. It would just show the time that it went off and the time that it went back on. And they did also say that they thought that it was a screen malfunction, and that they were going to get Ty, the ES&S technician, to come on up and work on it before the April election.
so Bob, if you know, on that particular situation on election night, when we were, or post-election morning, when it died, they haven't been able to see anything in an error log of any kind, or it's only accessible when he is actually coming here to look at the machine and get it ready for the
You know,
school?
I don't know the answer to that, but I believe what they were trying to look at the error log for was what happened on the day that you guys were down there and it dropped. I'm not certain if it was, Darlene, was it phrased so that we were looking for the error log for the day that we dropped it on election day?
Darlene Johnson from the auditor's office. I did, when I sent the letter to Alexa, I did also ask that I didn't really know what happened on election night and how that was resolved, and she did not address that. She only addressed what happened that day when we were demonstrating how the machines work downstairs.
My understanding is the error that happened downstairs a few weeks ago was involved with synchronizing the screen, and there
Right.
was a problem there. But on election night, when the machine just died, as I remembered it, that was the point of all the news media critiques and all of the questions, and I wanted to be able to have some kind of an answer for our meeting and our report that's going to go to both to your office and to the county commission when we're done with our process. So
She did not reply until 9 o'clock this morning, so we didn't follow up
Okay.
on that part of it.
well, thank you. If you could just follow that path along so we do get an answer, we would all appreciate it. Does anybody else have a?
Julie, can I ask you a question? So what is the runoff procedure in the primary? Because you have consolidated elections and because you have to provide for the possibility of a runoff, you know, if it's a federal 10 weeks later, what happens if it is are there any provisions for runoffs in city or school board elections out there?
Yeah, city elections are 3 weeks later.
Okay.
The
So
federal elections, I'm not sure
It's
if they're
10
weeks, yeah.
for those.
And under, the way I understand statute is that the runoff election for cities has to be run exactly like the original election. So we have to perform that, and there can't be any additional consolidation, like have a vote center for one ward if you have a runoff. So we just get ready and mail everything out to all the people, and it used to be 2 weeks, and that was really, really tight for the absentee balloting, but 3 weeks makes it a little bit easier.
Let's ask Bob what his plans are. We maybe don't need to make any recommendation if he's already planned on changes.
Good question.
Well, you know, I think when we talk about the future, we kind of got to go back to the past and see how we got here. And of course, when I got here, we had 4 650s down there, the old style machine. And I think the first election that I ran in 2012, we either dropped 1 or 2 of the machines toward the end of the election night, and that slowed us down. We didn't bother getting on the phone to try to bring them back up because we thought the 2 machines would handle the rest of it. During the city election, we fired up 3 of the machines, and then we dropped 1 of those about halfway down. So there's always been concerns about the technology of 650 as it aged, and the technology itself seems to be something of it is just plain outdated. And recently, when it was announced to us that Unity would go to Windows 7, then I approached our IT director about the possible purchase of the 850 machines. And Monty, would you care to elucidate any on the 850s? But you certainly could, because I didn't do it in a vacuum. Okay, I consulted our IT director, so I'd like him to comment on it. Nice shirt, by the way.
Monty Wadenbach, Minnehaha County IT Director. I guess I can't jump too much into the details of the 850. I originally looked at, kind of the specs of it. It certainly was the direction that things were going. But, generally I'll speak about technology and with the idea that it's a piece of technology. It can fail. Whether it's the 650, the 850, or the next model in the future, it's a piece of technology. And I typically would address this when I'm dealing with solutions that we have in the IT world where we're going to run with one more than what we actually need. So my recommendation would be, if you think you need 2 of these counters to count ballots for your election, you should get 3. Because if you have technical problems with one of them, then you can get by on 2. And that's how we kind of approach everything in the IT world. So that's my recommendations. Certainly if you're having problems with one of these machines, definitely need to be on the vendor to have them look at that and try to resolve it. But intermittent issues are the hardest issues to troubleshoot. And again, I'm not speaking on this machine specifically, but in my field, intermittent issues are the hardest to troubleshoot. If you can't reproduce the issue and you can't make it, not work, and you can't find a specific thing that you're doing to break it, those are the hardest things to resolve. So, it's, I guess, hard to say if they'll be able to find out specifically what happened on election night. It very well may be that they don't figure that out before the next election. So, my recommendation would be whether or not they figure out what happened on election night. Generally, in my industry, if we need 2 of something, we're going to buy 3.
Monty, in this whole process, do you assist at all in the testing of the equipment with the auditor's office?
No, we don't. I have a couple of staff that are part of the election process, but they're just getting the information off of now their thumb drives, I believe, and they're assisting with the process to upload those to the state.
So all of the service that's done on the equipment and programming and everything else is all involved with the ES&S
vendors, yeah.
consultants?
Yeah, and that's the best way. I mean, I don't have anybody that's an expert in my IT department with this machine. It's very specific to, elections, and not really any skill sets in my department that would lend itself towards managing these machines.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for?
No, not for you. I'm sorry, I thought Bob was going to.
Thank you,
Excuse
Monty.
me. On election night, do your ballots come in mass so that you are stacked up, and that's what you need the other scanner for? If your ballots come in in a cycle so that you can keep up with 2 scanners, at the price of an additional scanner, you have to consider whether you have that. Our ballots come in massively from the city all at once, so we are behind. Was that an issue on election night?
Well, let me kind of back up a little bit to how I got to how many machines we need. And what we did was we knew how many, I think it was 120, Sue, is it 120 ballots per minute that the 650s could process if there's no glitch?
I thought it was 350.
But
I thought it was 200.
okay, well, anyway, but the new machines were supposed to go a lot faster and handle more ballots per minute. And then, in conversations that I had with a gentleman from Sea Change who does the services and prints the ballots and is quite knowledgeable about the election service, we kind of did an audit and looked at how many ballots we typically run through an election and a heavy one, and Sioux Falls' growth patterns. And he told me 2 of them should be enough for your needs down there. And then another thing that I did was I called the election folks up in Anoka County, Minnesota, which has about 300,000 people, and then I called Hennepin County elections, and I talked to the gal up there, and they have a little over 1 million people. And Hennepin County uses the 850 strictly for absentee ballots, and she was quite impressed on how they handled the absentee ballots, and so we thought, well, two machines should do it. But I would tell you that as I went along, let's get back to the test ballots. Darlene has got the test ballot decks, and I think there's 25 ballots times for 71 precincts, and we run those ballots through the machines to test those machines before we get there. And we had filled them out in pencil, and we were getting out of the 25, 5 or 6 ballots spit back into the tray. And if you do those numbers, that's way too many ballots to have getting spit into the tray to have examined on election night. And so we called up ES&S, and there was a gentleman named Ty came out, and we thought we had the appropriate, we thought we had it ratcheted down to where it's not going to be running them all through, but not taking every little thing. Well, as election night progressed, after about an hour, I came to the conclusion that I probably should have had a 3rd machine, because it is not the speed with which that machine counts the ballots. It is the speed with which we process the ones that are rejected. And I was really surprised, Julie, that you said you had a dozen resolution boards out there, 10 or 12, and I thought, boy, that night if I could have had 10 or 12 resolution boards, maybe we could have kept up. But I was surprised at the amount of ballots that came out and the reasons that they came out of that machine. And after about an hour, when the ballots start coming in, Julie, like I've got Hawthorne over here, and they can wrap up pretty soon. It's a smaller precinct, and they physically don't have as far to travel. And so they'll come in after about half hour or 45 minutes. They bring the ballot box in, we check them in with all their stuff, and then some of the other close ones, they start filtering in, and then it seems like I get a wave of ballot boxes, and then as the night progresses, the ones that are farther out, up county and stuff, they start coming in. And so I would characterize it as we've got a steady slope up, a big plateau, and then it kind of drops off. And we unload the ballot boxes down there and get the counted ballots versus the unvoted ballots. And there's a sheet in between there, so we unload them. We've got the table where we sort them out. We've got the jigglers that jiggle them so they are squared up and they can go through the machine. And it used to be out in the precincts, when you had a ballot, at the end of the night, they had to open up that ballot box and make all the ballots go the same direction so the cut corner was the same. And we don't have to do that anymore. This machine will read them upside down, backwards, whatever. And so the election workers were really glad about that. But like I say, it was about an hour after we started looking at the reject ballots and doing the math on it, I knew it was going to be a long night. And I also knew then, we thought that these new machines were going to be so good at handling the absentees, we'd blow through them in the 45 minutes we had from 7 o'clock until the ballot boxes started rolling in. And we talked about it. It seemed like a pretty good idea, but in retrospect, it was probably a big mistake. Okay, so we talked that night about having another machine. I think the keys are getting more resolution boards, having them someplace, reconfiguring our space down there so everything is secure, getting one more machine, and what the discussions are kind of centered on is, should we have two machines doing the precinct ballots and one machine only doing the absentees? But I think since it's been cleared up and I think that in my mind, I think that I've gotten approval to count the absentees the day before, or not. Okay, let's talk about processing versus counting. Because before, when I brought this idea of counting the ballots the day before, they thought that I was going to count them and release the number. And that was not my idea. I knew that there was security that we would not release those numbers. So I think we had a kind of a division on semantics of language. Because I view processing ballots as when we're up here, the absentees, they take them out of the envelope, we sort them all out, we stamp them, we get them ready to haul down, and we take them downstairs. That is processing a ballot to me. Once you start putting them in a machine, you're counting the ballots. Now, whether you release those numbers or not is quite another thing. But it got out in the press and the media that Litz was going to count the ballots early and, throw the election, and all these crazy things got talked about. Nothing could have been further from the truth. So, with all those things happening out there and all this misinformation, we decided to just keep things as they were and not process those ballots. It didn't look like there was that many of them. Besides, we certainly had larger numbers of absentee ballots before. And so, Julie, I hope that kind of explained, the way the ballots come in on election night on the big elections. And kind of our reasoning, my thought process as the night progressed. And yes, I would very much like to buy one more machine. And I have the funds to do it. And probably buy poll books too, if that ever comes to fruition down here.
Thank you.
In the next meeting, when we talk about poll books, we'll be probably delving into that topic more
Very
during
good.
the Hart demonstration.
Very good. But is there any more questions that I can answer about the 850s or my feelings about them? I think they're an awesome machine. I really do. They're smooth. I like the way it sorts out. And it's like Monty said, any new technology is going to have its things. From an operator standpoint that night, things went very smooth. We had training. We had the factory training, and then we went down there. As a group of auditors that run the machines, we went down there and retrained ourselves. And from that point of view, from the manual operation of the operators part of that machines, I thought it went pretty smooth that night. I don't think we could have done any better. The big hang-up, of course, was lack of resolution boards. And I'd like to talk about those resolution boards, too, because It seems like I get, it's a stress thing to me, and I'd like to get it resolved about 10 days out. And one of the parties, the day of the election, they come up with the names for the resolution board. And to me, I can't do that. I mean, I have to have those names, and I'd like to have the backup names, and I'd like to contact those people and talk to them, and it just isn't possible under the situation that I've let happen as far as the resolution boards go.
Was that one of the hang-ups with getting resolution boards then, is you didn't have the names until the day of?
Well, you know, if I'd have known that we were gonna have so many ballots kicked out, I would have gotten some more names. But yeah, the truth is Bruce was wandering around the halls, and I conscripted him, and there were some other people that kind of got brought into the process. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning, when people started coming to work, we brought some people in and make sure that we've got the Democrat, Republican sitting at each table. Couldn't get a lot of D's or R's at some of them, so we put an independent, took a poll of the resolution board, and everybody thought an independent would work. But, you know, Deb was down there for a long time that night, and we had our core tables down there. And it was fantastic. I mean, I don't know what time you went home, Deb, but I think the sunlight was coming in the windows. And then we had other people step up to it and sit in and fill in until it was finally done.
You said you have the HAVA funds already to pay for another $850?
Yes, I do.
Does that, procedurally, do you have to get the county commission to approve?
I have to
use of
get the
those
county
funds?
commission to approve any purchases that we do, with, even if it is grant funds and even if they can't spend it. Yes, that is my understanding of the law.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that is once the county buys something like that, it becomes an asset.
Right.
And then are they stuck with replacing that asset later on? And my argument probably is going to be, yep. Because what else are they going to do,
In these purchases that you're having to do with the tabulators, one of the other questions, and we don't want to micromanage how you're going to be doing this process. So let's say you got the third machine sitting down there for next year's elections. What kind of testing would you consider doing ahead of time to look for, we discovered the problem with the people dropping the pen on the paper or doing scratches, and we ended up learning a lot in the resolution process. Will you be building test ballots to just show how the machines are working, at least in one precinct, with stray marks from now on?
That's a good question. We weren't, we do that. We test all the machines with test ballots.
But the test ballots are kind of like perfect ballots. Now we've learned a whole series of odd marks that can be put on a ballot to see, what.
And I think we could certainly take some of the old ballots out of the resolution table and run them through and check them and see how they're doing. Like I say, last time we realized ahead of time that we were having issues with those machines, so we had Ty come up from Omaha and he tightened the screen down. And then Julie, you'll have to pardon me, but I think we had a discussion about 9 o'clock the morning after the election, or 10 o'clock or something there, and you were talking about another form of adjustment on the machine, that there was actually two of them, if I remember right.
Yes, what we found out is that there's a screen on each 850 to tell it what it needs to outsource, and you were outsourcing, was it overvotes? Overvotes, which is what was picking up the hesitation marks. And we had it clarified from Kia at the time that you only sort blanks, which would have cut down almost all of it would have cut down all your hesitation marks from having to recreate, and you would have only had the ballot stamp issue, which is what we had, which is why we called in the extra teams.
But, as far as the new 850s and stuff, I think we'd probably test them all, a little bit more. If I got one, I'd want all three of them to be, if Ty comes back out and looks at these issues, like I'm planning on having him do, we would certainly have him, I'm going to talk to Julie here, and we'll get a few more details on those issues and have him look at all three of the machines and have them all calibrated to the same. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, would we test the new ones a little bit heavier than the two used ones? Probably not. I'd test them all the same. In
the setup, I had a conversation with an election official from Texas the other day, and they've been following what we're doing here. And I found that very fascinating, and one of the things that he brought up was that they do a series of tests through the year, even when they don't have an election, just to make sure everything is staying calibrated. And I had never heard of this before, so I thought I would bring that up. You know, just from storage, you can end up having issues. It's technology, as Monty was saying. Yes, Sue?
Can I ask Julie, so you didn't have any ballots with those hesitation marks kicked out?
We had started with having hesitation marks kicked out, and we were getting so many going to the resolution team that that's when I figured out that that screen was set on overvote, so then we changed it just
Okay.
to blanks.
And so after you took off the overvote sort, it wasn't kicking out those?
No, what
ballots
it was
anymore?
kicking out was the ballot stamps that were in the wrong place.
Okay. On the 650s, there used to be something called indeterminate mark. And did the 850s have that too? Did you see that message at all? Because that was, that's exactly the kind of thing that would be picked up by this hesitation mark
Yes.
thing. It would come out as an indeterminate mark in that the machine didn't know for sure
How to count it.
how to count it. And
I can't remember the wording on the report when it kicks it out, and it tells you what race exactly it has a question
Okay.
on. If you have the overvote or, I think it's called overvote button connected, then it'll
Okay.
start kicking those out. And it tells you exactly which race. And it is a pinprick practically anymore.
Since your machines were set that way too, it sounds like ES&S must have set them that way.
Yes, and I did talk to Alexa about that.
Because that is not in accordance with South Dakota law, and so
No.
it sounds like ES&S set up the machines.
That
not-
way.
Not in accordance with state law.
Mhm.
So that's something for the Secretary of State to make sure that they notify all county auditors of too, to make sure that doesn't recur.
And I know they had the Harvard Lisa's in Meade County wasn't set up that way. So I don't know if it was just a fluke that Bob's and mine were.
Interesting.
I think the marks that you're talking about, they call them unclear marks, basically
Oh,
what that's.
Which would be the
which
same
is
as
the same as
indeterminate.
indeterminate.
And you weren't getting any of those unclear marks kicked out after you turned off the overvotes?
No.
That sounds like a simple solution.
You know, we tried to get the pens out to all the precincts, and I think we did. We sent them out in the bags, but there were a number of precincts that still had the pencils, and they sat up here at school class. We emphasized it, but they did not use the pens, and they sent in pencils. And so every once in a while, we'd get a ballot that was filled out by pencil, and it was a little bit too light. And so it'd spit that ballot out. It'd go to the resolution board. They wouldn't really recreate it. What they would do is fill in the marks and then send it back to you. So that took a lot less time than to go ahead and recreate the ballot.
Julie, you use pencils, don't you?
No, not anymore.
You use blue pens, you
We
said.
use the cheapest Bic blue pen that we can
Okay.
find.
We bought some for that ES&S's recommendation. They were about $1 a piece, and they ran out during the election. The ink actually ran out of the tube.
I thought when Mike Oberston was here at our last meeting, he said blue pens were their recommendation. So it sounds like you were getting different information from ES&S.
Because these were black ink.
Yeah, these were black, really, and it seemed like the paper really soaked in the ink.
And
ES&S said those were certified pens, so that's what they were recommending.
And I would tell you this too, the ball on them was a little bit bigger. They seemed to draw like dust from the paper, and the dust would collect on there. And if that dust ball fell off and you hit it with this part of your hand, you'd get a smudge on the ballot. And that was also a thing that I saw several times that night.
Are you going to review the ballot marking device you're using? Are you-
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can get the cheap Bics, I think that's the way to go. People saw those nice pens that were marked
Already have
ES and
them?
S, and they went,
Good.
but you know, the pen that was recommended said ES and S elections on it. I think a lot of people fancied those pens, so when they got done with it, they went,
Well, lucky for you, they weren't working right. Steal
it's full
away,
of bad
public.
pens. More reason to be upset with me.
Come up, Bob,
Or Greg.
or Greg, I'm sorry.
He has to come.
Would you
Please
come to the podium, please?
We've had comments from people watching
Oh, okay.
watching that they
Um,
can't hear.
Does the type of ink that you use for the official ballot stamp make a difference?
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
Because I was
Red.
wondering if that should be changed to blue too.
Nope.
Green.
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 Green is the new red.
Yep.
Yeah, they found that out.
Yep.
Because Pennington County had problems with the red ink. so.
We were all using red ink. And then we found out, I think at the first meeting here, that it's green.
Yeah,
And we
did.
just ordered brand-new ballot stamps, and
Okay.
we're reordering.
Are they also gonna possibly make it where, you know, they put something that's kinda subdued or hidden on the ballot itself to actually tell people, or my workers, where the stamp goes?
It's called a watermark.
Yeah, whatever.
No, a box. You're gonna.
Yeah, we're thinking about a box, and we're also, we've had conversations with both the Secretary of State, all the auditors across the state, as well as Sea Change, who prints all of the ballots for the state, that you need to make sure that there's a big space on the front, wherever you want them to put the ballot stamp, so that there is no way that they don't have room to put it, which was part of our problem in one of our biggest precincts. We had purposely filled up the front of the ballot, and they, even though we told them not to,
The stamp in the
violated
front
those
instead of-
lines.
Okay,
And that's
yeah.
when we had to start calling in all the people to recreate, because it takes so much time to recreate a ballot.
Yeah, also another one too is, I don't know if this is the right place for it or not, but on the ballots themselves is, changing the direction of the ovals from horizontal to vertical, because you write a little better that way
That
than you do.
We can't do.
the whole system is predicated on those. The machines are set for those ovals.
I know when I
That's
was
one
here a
thing.
couple weeks ago, the guy from the company said that he was looking into that because he didn't know, but I didn't know if that was, I know it's just easier.
Kia, do you have a question?
I just think that on the changing the ovals, you did ask Mike Holstein, like he was here at that last meeting, and the way those machines are programmed and everything, I don't think it can be changed the other direction.
Yeah, as
I think it's some software in the actual machine itself, so
it's
I don't know if that is an option for us to change those ovals or not. It did sound like it could be done when we talked to Mike, and involved at that last meeting he attended.
One issue too, one issue if you had them oriented vertically, I think there would be much more chance for voters to accidentally go outside the line and hit the oval above or below, and by law, that's an overvote. So I think it's a better protection for the voters if the ovals are oriented horizontally.
It seemed to me that Mike Overstein had mentioned something about some technical issues, and that's why they were horizontal versus vertical. And that may tie into that situation that Sue just brought up.
Well, you know, before I got the election services from Sea Change, I went up to Plymouth, Minnesota, and I spent a day up there with the representative of the company, and I toured the factory. And they were producing ballots for some place in Wisconsin that day that I was there. And we did have a discussion about ink and the color of ink and what works best on those ballots. And he was talking about when they produce a ballot, the colors that go into it just to produce the black, that when they make a ballot. And the combination of colors, I remember one of them was Magneto, which is kind of a bubblegum pink, goes into their black. Now, I had no idea how you can put pink ink into something and come out with black, but that was part of the discussion. And we talked about what would be the best marking for them, and he at that time says it doesn't matter. You can use pens or pencils. It'll pick up anything. And, you know, I know the 650, somewhere down there, Sue, you had left a manual or something, and they were talking about the spectrum of colors that the 650 would pick up. And apparently at some point when you had the 650s, that got readjusted by ES&S or the factory that made the 650s. Did they change something on the scanner? Or, but anyway, I remember reading that. But I did not know that black was made up out of so many colors, and there could be so many different colors of black. You know, it's kind of amazing to me. But, you know, the first county to get the 850 was over at Mitchell. And she had the black ink stamps when she first started, and that caused a problem in one of her elections. And so she went out and was advised to get the red ink. And because the red ink stamps were the ones that weren't going to cause any problem. So at that, we thought it was a hot tip. I went out and purchased $2,000 worth of stamps that are red self-inking stamps. Everybody out the precincts loved them because they didn't have the ink pad. But I got red pad. I got new red ink precinct stamps too. 2 sets of them. One of them for the absentee and one of them that go out in the precincts. And now I'm hearing it's changing again.
Such is life in elections, isn't it?
Well, I just wonder what red and green would turn out to be. Some kind of a pretty purple, wouldn't it? Maybe the color of your coat back then. I don't know.
That's fuchsia, Bob.
Fuchsia, okay.
Does anybody else have anything to bring up in this topic? That being the case, I'd like to move on to another area that may or not be on your documents, but wanted to bring up a discussion that we'd had at the last meeting about we need to probably discuss how we're going to do the report and how we're going to compile it. And Bob gave us an example of, in our pack today, of what they've done with the Minnehaha County Corrections Facilities Interim Report that the County Commission has also asked to have compiled. And I've asked Bob to discuss that with us, and so we can start coming up with some ideas how we're going to work with the process that the county has already deemed for these types of committees. So go ahead, Bob.
And yes, I've already been asked about corrections. Why are we asking the Elections Review Committee to look in on corrections? And we're not asking you to do that. We're just, this is something that came out of the work of a committee that was similarly put together and tasked with a responsibility of looking into a particular subject matter and getting back to the commission. And so I simply bring this forward to you as a template that we could use to describe a number of meetings, the background, information gathered, and potential recommendations. So it's a template, nothing more, and happy to tweak it, change it, or use it in any combination of the above that you'd like to see fit.
We have a couple of more meetings, one for sure, and possibly a second yet to go in our process. And one of the things that I would like to have us all consider is bringing in any additional questions that we've got for at least the last meeting, since our next meeting is going to be very busy, and then determine how we're going to take the time to compile this report and what kind of meetings we'll have, or if we'll just do it through email, phone conversations between us, just to kind of pull this together so that we can have it set up. So anybody have any thoughts? Julie?
You,
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that I guess my expectation as staff support for this committee was that I was going to, at least at this point, largely based on the minutes and the discussions you've had at your previous meetings, start putting that information into subject groupings and putting that into the framework of this type of a structure for a report. Obviously, there would, once that information was presented that way, I imagine there'd be a considerable amount of back and forth of tweaking what the ultimate final product is there. But I guess I was expecting that I was going to do a bulk of the writing and clearly take your direction of what you wanted to see in that report, but largely off of the discussions you've had and the information that's been gathered in these meetings was going to start to build that into this report. And I think even to this point from the meetings you've had, there's a lot of that I can start plugging in and you can look at. And as we come down to the end, there will clearly be additional things that go in. But I think this is a building process that I can certainly get started with what you've done to this point.
Does anybody have any additional questions in this area? Because we would really like that. You know, we need the guidance from that side of it and the organization and my concern is that just as we were brought up with some new things today that to actually look at and a couple things that I would actually like to move into under new business, that if we could, does everybody feel comfortable with the way that Bob is planning to do this? And I would say it's the consensus of the group that
Yes.
we just move along with you starting an outline at least
Sure.
of the topics that, because each of the meetings has been set up with specific topics along the way.
There's a definite amount of information there that we can plug in. I've received a number of possible recommendations that can be put to paper, and as a committee you can sift through those and determine all or some of those that you want to be part of the final report. And I think this can be a work in progress, but certainly there's a good foundation to begin building with.
Bob, did you have a question?
I wanted to clarify something that Robert was doing.
Please come.
I think I misspoke when I was talking about the Mitchell situation and what went on out there. When I went up to Sea Change to look at the new ballots, when I got here, we were buying ES&S card stock for the ballots, and they were already partially printed, and so we take them out to Brown and Sanger. But when I went up to Sea Change, the ballots that we get, they come in great big rolls of paper, and I noticed that the paper was a little bit thinner than the card stock that we were getting from ES&S. And how that played into the situation out in Mitchell was they had the old hand stamps in the ink pad, and when they were stamping them, the ink would soak through the ballot, and it was causing them problems. It wasn't, I think I said it was black, but it wasn't. It was the red color. And so she recommended getting the self-inking things that didn't put as much ink down on the paper itself. So I'd like to clarify that.
Quick question on that. So when you got the cardstock from ES&S, are you saying that it had the markings on the side already, or?
It's got the markings on the outside, the parts of that allow the ballot to go through the machine. So when you program it, Brown and Sanger will finish printing out the ballot. Okay, but there are certain markings that are already on that card stock. Yes.
You told us in a prior meeting about so many styles. Julie's mentioned styles. And so each of these ballots, if you have 10 styles of ballots, then you order those 10 different styles, and then Brown and Sanger would print the inside?
Yes, that's correct. And what comes is there's some coding marks that are on the side. And for each precinct, those coding marks and there's messages there for the machine that tell you which ballot it is. And so each one of those would have a little bit different coding marks to tell the machine which precinct. Am I correct, Sue?
That used to be the case, but in later years, the stock was blank, and Brown and Sanger
Did it all?
did it all. Yeah, the stock came blank, but Brown and Sanger would put on the framework, and those tracking marks.
Because I would drop ship and it would go right out there to Brown and Sanger, so.
But you didn't order it by style from,
No, no,
you
no.
just ordered
Blank
ballot stock,
stock.
100,000 sheets.
Blank stop, and they drop
Blank,
shipped it
yeah.
out to Brown and Sanger.
Yeah.
So,
But just to clarify, that was ES&S ballot stock. It wasn't something different we were getting because we were using Brown and Sanger. It was the official
that was the real deal,
ES&S
yep.
stock.
And the reason I bring this up is in last year's city election, there was a ballot challenge. And we had a hearing at the courthouse, and the judge made a ruling, and we had a discussion about if those ballots needed to be reprinted. It appeared that we were going to be getting the ballots out of South Carolina. They were going to be printed at an ES&S facility down there.
Well, I don't remember, I think it.
But it was an ES&S print
right,
shop.
because
that
we
was-
we would not have had enough stock to print it, and Brown and Sanger could not in any way, shape, or form get those printed overnight, that many. So yeah, it was gonna be a, private plane flying to pick up stock, go print ballots, come back. It would have been quite a process.
So in that process, the reason I brought that up is if there was a type of ink that was used on that special that might have had a graphite in it or some, other than just the color that, would have been sensitive. And I was just wondering if Brown and Sanger, if they were getting a blank piece of paper
Blank.
or a
Blank
form
piece
that
of
was
paper.
already, then they would have had to recreate accordingly, and that's why I was wondering.
The ballot stock is only manufactured in one place in the United States. You can have them printed different spots once they're trained by ES&S because of the type of ink that has to be used for the channel codes on the side. But it's a very controlled ballot stock.
And so this possibly, Lori, this print shop down in the southeastern part of the United States was the only one that had that stock available?
That was probably the case. I was working on another angle of it, and so someone else was working on that part that afternoon, so I'm
Plus
not
the
sure.
process
Yeah.
to be able to print it overnight.
It's kind of like money.
You have to let it dry and
It's kind of like money. The paper has specs to it, and you have to meet those
Yeah.
specs.
very controlled. You just can't pick up a roll of paper and print ballot stock.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Bob. So, appreciate that. That kind of fit into the old business. Is there any other old business anybody else would like to bring up? I did have one thing that I wanted to bring up under this category because I've had some people ask me. And when we were having our discussion last week about summarizing the differences between voting center, super precinct, and precinct, I guess we never really finished summarizing that. And I wondered if we could go back to that just for a moment so that anybody that's watching on YouTube or in our report would understand the differences between the three types of voting. Like Greg was talking about consolidating precincts or doing something. And does anybody want to add to that to help us understand it, even summarize? Julie, you've had 30 years of working in this area, and you probably could summarize it faster than any of us. So
The different types of precincts are there. When you talk about a vote center, that allows a smaller number of voting places that you would go to. And when you have a vote center concept, any voter can go to any vote center, and vote their appropriate ballot. And it makes no difference whether you're going to central count or precinct count those. I would believe a super precinct or a combined polling place is what we use in Pennington County. Is you have a larger facility where you put more than one precinct in it. You still, as a voter, have to go to your correct precinct. You are given your correct ballot, and your information is kept by a precinct level. And then a precinct is the smallest polling place and voting jurisdiction, if you will, as to what you vote, which means there's one ballot for a specific polling place, and you have to go to that.
Can I add to that? What you termed super precincts, I would probably just say multiple precincts in one location.
Yes.
Because this jurisdiction did try something called super precincts, and that was something different than what you explained. Say if Sioux Falls City had 50 precincts, this failed experiment with super precincts, we would take like 5 of them, combine them into one, and have that at one location. And so instead of having 50 precincts for an election, we had like 15 super precincts. You still had to go to the specific location, and that was a nightmare, because then when we went back to the general election and spread them back out to the regular precincts, nobody knew where to go. So it was a little bit like voting centers in that we cut down the number of precincts, but everybody still had to go to a specified location. So you didn't get the advantage of being able to vote anywhere, you just had the extra confusion of not knowing where to go vote.
Yes.
That, I had heard about that situation, and that's why the confusion was added in here. Greg brought up a point in one of the meetings about on that stretch at East 6th Street here in Sioux Falls, where there are several voting locations for the precincts that were only a few blocks apart. And I think that's where some of the confusion was brought into, and I wanted to just bring that up and say, in that stretch, could we have, from the auditor's office point of view, could we have tied in those 6 into maybe 2 or 3 locations? Was that a space issue, or just asking the question that was raised?
I laid everything all out on a map here.
That could be brought, is that possible to lay any of that on the overhead, or?
Between 18th and 33rd Street on Bonson.
What's
there's
that?
5 polling places.
We'll just wait just a moment and let Bob try and put that on the overhead so that, at least part of it, so that we could show it.
What am I focusing on?
In here, 33rd to 18th, there's 5 polling places.
Now that I've folded it.
Go ahead. I got to see first.
Can I ask, do we have precinct by precinct election returns on your website? I'm not finding them. You don't think they are? I find the returns just a summary. Through 2010, we did have precinct level results shown on there. I can look at that for the purposes I had, but that's, sometimes people want to look at that. Let's see here.
That's Bonson Avenue.
And there's 4 within 8 blocks.
33rd Street or Morningside.
So we're looking, I believe that is the question we had earlier about is that 6th up there across the top? If you could.
26.
That's 26, and then further up, so even looking at,
That's 12.
okay, any one of those streets, Bob, if you could help us out, I see right below Madison, there's like the 4 right in that area, or at least the 3 that are between Sycamore, Cleveland, Madison, the 3 of them right there, and I'm assuming that's Kenny Anderson, and,
Well, looking at, the reason we never combine those is I'm looking back at the 2000 election results that I can get online by precinct. And at the 2010 general election, by my quick count, there were about 3,800 voters at those 4 precincts that we're highlighting on Bonson Avenue between 18th and 26th, there is no way there is any facility in that part of the city that can handle 4,000 voters.
Okay.
You know, and
And
honestly,
that was my question is.
I've got the same situation out at Memorial. Memorial gets slammed every year, but I've got a precinct that is a Church of the Gate, which is about 6 blocks away from there. And then I've got the library, which is actually on the same piece of ground as Memorial is. And I guess what you got to look at, like Sue was saying, is the turnout and make sure that you're not loading that place up too much. And you also want to, if you're a precinct, you want to have it as close to that neighborhood as you can. And so that's a consideration too. Different precincts have historically different turnout ratios, so that's a consideration of it. Having a precinct as close to into that precinct as you can get is a consideration. Out there where RF Pettigrew is, there's a whole neighborhood out there. And RF Pettigrew is the only place that you can have one. While they were doing work on that, the school was doing work on it during the primary and the fall, so I had to double up over at Kennedy. So when you went into Kennedy, I actually had 2 precincts, not combined, but there were 2 separate precincts in the same building. So it's like a necessity, it's a convenience thing, it's kind of a judgment call. Does some of it look funny on paper? Yes, it does, but I think if you look at the history of it and the voting patterns of people there, that would give you a good answer.
Well, that was in a sense, the logic that I wanted to make stated in the record. And I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any questions on that?
So the biggest reason for that, the split precinct sites, is because of the size, the number of people.
There's
and the
some of
size
them,
the
yeah.
buildings.
There's some of them out there. The Memorial one right now, and I was going to have a look at it this year because Memorial's got a lot of voters out there, and they're adding new territories. And one of the new territories wants to vote at Memorial, but they're in a legislative district that's a little bit outside of that. So I've got some issues to work out to kind of balance things out. And you know, the census happened in 2010. And Sue had a pretty good balance out there. I've not had to change anything, since. But I got here during a low part of the city's growth too, and now that's starting to pick back up. And the patterns of growth would, it's hard to guess which places are going to be selling houses and what economic strata that house is, and the smaller ones tend to have more children, and by the schools and et cetera, et cetera. So. I do have some issues out there that I did want to look at as far as the precincts go and maybe dividing up the lines, but I don't know enough about it at this point here to go ahead with something like that.
Got a second, I'll explain what brought this on.
Can you come around to the other side so you're by the microphone, Greg?
Got a second, I'll bring around what brought this on to me is, let's see if that works, okay. I run Kenny Anderson, that's above my finger there. In the last 2 elections, I have sent over 230 people each election right over here to Windflower. And I didn't even know until I was laying this map out that there was another polling place 2 blocks to my west.
What is that? Which precinct?
4748.
No,
Kenny.
the one to the west of, that you said of Kenny Anderson. There isn't one there.
Grace Lutheran Church 49.
That is on 18th Street, straight down.
Is that where the X is on 18th and
The
Bonson?
That's 18th and Cleveland there. It is a block and a half west of
Okay,
18th and
because-
Cleveland. So that is not up there.
Okay,
It's
what I've got
one
here,
more in that.
Grace Lutheran Church, 3700 East 3rd. Kenny Anderson Community Center is at,
Better look at that
3901
map of
East 3rd.
his. He's got your map there, so I wonder if there's,
There might be a typo on here. I think what is looking at here, what came up, is that we used to use the library, which isn't
Yeah.
too far from there, but I don't use that anymore. And somehow, during this change here, we haven't. Grace Lutheran. That's a typo. That's the wrong address for Grace Lutheran, because I think Grace Lutheran is over on 18th Street.
Yeah, it is.
That's an easy fix. The card they get would be right then, it's just on that map that needs to be corrected.
Okay.
I didn't think there was a.
Yeah,
church
your
up
map,
there.
your map on the website is incorrect.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy.
Yep.
And I don't even know where JFK schools are.
JFK schools would be way down here, and it's way in the southwest part of Sioux Falls.
Oh, okay.
Just as a point of
Don't get in that
information, the
neighborhood.
Kenny Anderson and Wildflower in the 2010 general had 3,400 voters. So even with Grace Lutheran out there, you had a really substantial number of voters there.
Yeah, I know, we were busy and we were swamped, but I still
Oh,
had
yeah.
one person that was, calling down here, constantly almost, because we had people that, Wildflower coming here and going to,
That-
Wildflower.
That's where e-poll books would.
Right.
really
E-poll
help.
books would help with that, but you're not going to ever get rid of that problem when you have vote centers being done in 2 different elections versus by precinct.
Yeah.
That problem will not go away, and it doesn't make any difference how many times you notify a voter where they're supposed to go for any individual elections. They just go to whichever one they're driving by. It just makes no difference. You just can't keep them up to date.
Well, I think we've kind of covered that area, and thank you very much for bringing that, Greg. And it helped finish that question, for us at least. Anybody else have any other old business? I'd just like to go into new business. And does anybody else have any new business? And I'm thinking 3 things, and we'll talk to Robert about this in setting up the agenda, but I'd actually like to consider having bringing in one of the AutoMark machines, just so we could see it. 'Cause some of us have never looked even at the AutoMark machine, and since it's been part of the discussion, we would like to be able to at least see how it, if they've still programmed for the last election or anything, it would be great to see how it worked.
We've got one that I teach class on, and it's actually got a fake little election about what kind of ice cream you like, what kind of car you want to drive, that
That's
sort of thing. And we
perfect.
could set it up for that. so.
That's perfect. And then we keep getting brought into our discussions on another area is sea change synergy. And is there, is any of their people working in the area at all that they could, we could have a little discussion about how their process works in a little more detail? I have questions that I'm,
Well, I would certainly be willing to contact the main person up there and kind of leave it up to him to decide, who he'd want to send down.
I would anticipate if we did bring this into our topics, it would be in the, not next meeting, but the following meeting, because we have a pretty full agenda for these 2 things that I was talking about. And then, as long as you're standing there, Bob, we've been talking about the resolution boards. And, some of us have been on resolution boards, others have had to organize them, and maybe we need to have a few minutes of discussion on resolution boards themselves and the legalities that are involved with resolution boards.
I definitely want to load up on resolution boards next time. That's going to be a major staffing issue as I go into the election cycle.
In that process, we have the political parties that you have to contact, want to know, what kind of potential liability issues that your office has in running the election, and having to, at the last minute, throw in an independent in there. I know that was at about 8 o'clock in the morning when we grabbed one of your independents and had her sit in on the resolution board, and I want to make sure that those things are covered and at least the Board of Election rules have followed with.
I think Ken McFarland came to work and came down there, and he sat in on it, and that was his registration. And then I think we had a lady that was an independent as well. So.
I remember voting on her.
I did not know how to find out, I mean, at that point, if it was legal or not. So what I did was ask the resolution board how they felt about it, and it was unanimous in their consent that an independent could go both ways. I've had discussions with the Secretary of State's office, because this also plays into when I get election workers. I have trouble finding Democrats in some ends of town. I have trouble finding a few Republicans in other ones. And where do the independents belong? And I put them to work on there and call them a neutral, so.
That's covered in law.
Is it? I was
You
not
can
aware
do
of
that.
so.
It's, that's legal.
Okay, good. 'Cause I did it.
I don't think there's anything specific, though, about resolution boards. I think we've just always thought it carried over, but the resolution boards are supposed to be, you're supposed to get names from the county parties. So
But
I
there's-
think the assumption has always been that those would be members of that party, but
But there's
it's not
also a limit
specified.
on to what days they have, number of days out, they have to have that information sent in. And
Not the resolution boards.
I-
The precinct officials.
yes,
they-
that's
they-
what I'm talking about, yeah.
mhm.
The resolution boards, I think the law says I have to contact the party within 10 days. I'm not certain if it's that or to give them other information. The 10 days, I know if I want to count the ballots ahead, process the absentee ballots ahead of time, I got 10 days to do that. But it sure would help if I had that information up ahead. I was able to get their names and make sure that they were registered voters and all that sort of thing, so.
I believe Joel asked a question in one of the earlier meetings about having a local county administrative manual to, procedures manual to follow. And it was discussed that we had state law and rules that we have to follow, but then, internally, is there a procedure book that follows, from one election to another that maybe needs to be compiled if there hasn't been one already? And possibly in what we're doing here, we can, assist in that process as what we've learned through these meetings. Just wanted to tie that up, and if anybody has anything else that they'd like to bring up under the new business, I would ask, I guess we'll be adjourned then, since I guess I don't have to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.